Well, I can't hear you at all, so I'll just give a bit of an overview of the film that me and Jacqui Deevoy have been working on. So, yeah, we interviewed a bunch of families that had been, they'd basically been victims of involuntary euthanasia, where doctors and nurses had taken it upon themselves to euthanize their patients, essentially against their will. So you're dealing with a lot of traumatized people, that these traumatized family members can't get over what has happened to them. They were typically euthanized with midazolam and morphine. We all know about Mac Hancock ordering loads of morphine and midazolam at the time. Him lying about it in 2023, saying he'd never heard of midazolam and morphine when we've got documents showing that he was talking about it back in 2020. And yeah, the film is 2.5 hours, so it's a long film, but it's very detailed. It goes into massive facets of the people's lives that this happened to, and for many of them, they had kind of heard about this involuntary euthanasia going on in hospitals and care homes, and they kind of half believed it and half didn't believe it. And then even though that they tried to stop it themselves, they were kind of in shock that this happened to someone they knew. So yeah, and another thing that came across is a lot of the death certificates were put with COVID during that period, presumably to bump up the COVID numbers and to get a COVID death certificate. Now, this is talked about quite extensively in the film, but COVID death certificates at Nuremberg, people like doctors and nurses, a very small percentage, were put on trial and convicted for falsifying and changing death certificates. And so this is quite a serious crime. It was considered a serious crime after World War II. But during this period, they seem to be have been putting COVID on every single death certificate they could. Now, this extends back to the Liverpool Care Pathway, which was abolished in 2013 for its horrendous abuses. Essentially the same kind of abuse that we've seen since COVID, and which it was ramped up for in COVID. And we have two documents, the NG163 document and the NG191 document. And those documents were produced by NICE, which presents itself as an external governing body, but really it just reports to the health secretary. So this is essentially the government putting in these protocols, and these protocols killed probably upwards of hundreds of thousands of people in Britain during the supposed COVID pandemic. And yeah, in the NG163 document, for instance, they have a sentence in there about not being worried about using midazolam and morphine together, because they act as a kind of like, it's like a cocktail that acts together with each other, which essentially represses your respiratory system. So they were handing out this cocktail of drugs to people with repressed respiratory, which represses their respiratory system. So this is, of course, is going to kill lots and lots of people. And then in the NG191 document, you have remdesivir as being a drug used to treat COVID. Now, remdesivir is a failed drug. They tried it in the Ebola trials, and it killed like 53 or 54%. I can't remember exactly the amount of people that it killed in those trials. And they brought that drug back because Anthony Fauci had the patents for that drug. So him and the CDC stood to gain a mint by selling this failed toxic drug. And if you've been following our various health disasters for the last 40 years or so, a lot of people have pointed to this, and this goes through in the documentary as well with Ken McCarthy, who had covered the HIV/AIDS scam as well. And in that, they started dishing out AZT, which was like, AZT was such a bad drug, it failed all its trials, that they essentially killed off the drug. The creator of it said, this can't be used. It kills all the cells in the body and will eventually kill someone. Now, Anthony Fauci at the time, he had the patents for the AZT as well. So he killed hundreds of thousands of people during that HIV/AIDS scamdemic. And then you can see how they've done essentially the same thing. But this was happening all up and down the country. Many people went into care homes, and this has come out with the Scottish and UK COVID inquiries, which have not been covered by alternative media at all. But a lot of people have been testifying, like care home owners, doctors, nurses, people working in care homes, that the ambulances were refusing to take sick people to the hospital unless they had a do not resuscitate order in place. Now, how ridiculous is that? That if something happens to you, you're not going to be resuscitated. We also have forged signatures on the do not resuscitate orders. Many of the people we interviewed found out later that from their lawyers that they had forged signatures on their do not resuscitate orders. Take for example, the UK COVID inquiry and the Scottish COVID inquiry. Many people have come out and said that their lawyers had to dig through and find that. So we've seen that they were managed to kill people via a cocktail of drugs, via essentially neglect, and also putting them on withdrawing food and liquids, which they do within 72 hours. And some of the conversations between the doctors and patients are just absolutely shocking, because they talk about euthanasia, or murdering a family member with such
nonchalance.
Yes, exactly. Nonchalance. It's just absolutely disgusting. Like one of the women we interviewed she thought she was just going to amuse herself and say, because the doctor had said to her, "Oh, we need to euthanize her before like 4 p.m. on a Friday because he wanted to get away for the weekend." And she said, just to see what he would say. And she said, "So, if we did it, how would it happen?" And he went, "Oh, she'd slip away after about 72 hours because they withdraw food and liquid. And then they also give them this cocktail of midazolam and morphine."
I like the euphemism, Richie. Slip away.
Yes, it's absolutely shocking.
Like a boat on a slipway.
Yes, it's absolutely disgusting.
Slide into the death zone.
Exactly. Yeah. And so all these people are deeply traumatized that we interviewed, and I mean, it's just a disgrace. I don't think people realize the extent to how this has happened, because if you, like, for example, Jacqui runs kind of what turned into a support group when she first started hearing about this, and she was saying how people after many years would be like, "Oh, that happened to my mum, that happened to my dad, that happened to my auntie." So this is happening up and down the country. And in the documentary, I link it to the essential problem with the pensions crisis we have in this country and the aging population. And if you need to balance the budget, the only thing you can really do is lower life expectancy and basically kill off a lot of old people, which these protocols were designed to do. I can hear you now, Basil. So that's that's good. So if you want to ask me any questions, feel free.
It's an observation, really. This is something that I was talking about with some friends on a Monday night. The whole country was traumatized by the whole COVID farrago, as it were. Let's not forget the number of people that committed suicide because their businesses went under. The general sort of sense of doom and gloom, the tremendous fear-mongering on the part of government when they really should have been reassuring people. Such that, and of course, the damage done to children forced to wear those stupid masks and the restricted breathing that goes with them. People now don't want to go there. The whole thing was like a sort of collective nightmare. Well, it was a collective nightmare, and I think the difficulty that filmmakers like yourself these days have got is when you want to get forensic with the detail of what happened. I'm afraid to say, in this era of genocide and holocausts and military grade psyops, people are inclined to just sort of shrug and say to themselves, well, we want to get on with our lives quietly. Thank you very much. Granny might have been murdered, but so what? I've got a house now.
Yeah, it's a troubling kind of era we see ourselves in, because, as you said, you bring it up now, it's as if you've, excuse my French, but farted at the table of polite society. But,
yes.
But this is important because they're euthanizing people against their will, and many of the people that we interviewed went to the police, and the police did absolutely nothing about it, but because they just considered it, I don't know, if you shoot someone, then you'll stand in a courtroom the next day. But apparently, if you inject someone with a poison cocktail, then you're free to go. Yeah, I mean, there's many troubling aspects to this, and for example, Ken McCarthy points this out that in the documentary, that at that time they essentially let in loads of doctors and nurses from all around the world. And previously in Britain or the United States, if you were a doctor in, I don't know, some African or South American country or something like that, you were essentially given a broom. You weren't allowed to do medicine. You had to sort of start from square one. They waived that all during that period, and then they let all these people into like ICU wards where they may have never ever worked on an ICU ward in their entire life, and they're following these protocols of for example, a couple of the protocols I missed were the ventilators. Ventilators are you have a very low survival rate on a ventilator. It is absolutely horrific if you get put on a ventilator, because they essentially have to paralyze your body with various paralyzing drugs, and then let a machine do the breathing for you. Now, the longer you stay on a ventilator, the more likely you are to die. But they incentivize this in the United States. For example, if you were kept on a ventilator for more than 72 hours, a hospital got $39,000. And so, and with remdesivir, they incentivized it as well.
Really bizarre. That's really bizarre stuff. And I remember the campaign to build low-cost ventilators that James Dyson got involved in. In the end, his model wasn't required. I mean, I must admit, I didn't know. I'm not a medic, exactly what ventilators did, but when you explain it, then it's virtually a death sentence being put in one.
Yeah, it's a really, they called it the hose pipe, because they essentially have to put a giant hose down your throat and breathe for you. And then you have all these bags hanging above you to keep you paralyzed so you don't move, to feed you, saline drips, that kind of thing. And so you've got about 9 bags attached to you while you're on a ventilator. But not only did they incentivize the ventilator, they incentivized the remdesivir, which I mentioned earlier. But that was a complete failed drug in the Ebola trials. They brought it back for COVID-19. And in the NG191 document, which was on how to treat COVID, they say to use remdesivir. Now, remdesivir causes liver and kidney failure. That's what was killing all those people in the Ebola trials. So, but in the United States, we have clear documentation of them incentivizing remdesivir. And I'm sure they had ways of incentivizing it in Britain as well. It's just less clear here because we don't have the documentation on it. But for remdesivir, they would give you bonuses for every bunch of bags would make up a course. And then, so you got a bonus each time you gave a bag, and then you got a bigger bonus when you gave an entire course. So, I mean, I'm sure you remember at the time they were talking about how COVID attacks the liver and kidneys. That wasn't COVID-19. That was remdesivir destroying the liver and kidneys. So, I mean, I think it's a troubling thing because people like to think that our medicine isn't entirely corrupt, our scientific community is entirely corrupt. But to be honest with you, the majority of scientists and doctors in our society are white-collar criminals that deserve prison.
Very strong words, Richie. Another aspect, of course, of the whole COVID farrago is the fallout from the injections. And on that score, the latest is that we can expect 6 million new cancer cases in the coming years. I wonder why.
Today, 29-year-old Josh Cull can walk and see cancer-free. But only 4 years ago, a brain cancer diagnosis robbed him of his mobility and caused him to develop daily sickness and temporarily lose his eyesight.
The NHS allowed me to survive cancer, but Maggie's and the support of other charities such as Macmillan allowed me to thrive after cancer. So, you know, the NHS is built for a purpose. It's like a factory, right? You know, you've got this constant conveyor belt, you know, helping as many people as possible. But unfortunately, with that, the doctors, they just don't have the time or the funding just to provide the level of support which cancer patients need.
That's why Josh is backing a coalition of 60 charities calling on the government to commit to a national cancer plan. They're warning 6 million new cancer cases could be diagnosed in England by 2040.
We would like to see the UK elevated from the lower leagues of national cancer survival to the top of the Premier League of cancer survival. A huge jump from where we are now. That means meeting cancer waiting times. That means backing research. That means taking action to prevent more cancers in the future.
The earlier that cancer is diagnosed and treated, the better the chances of recovery. So part of the aim is to hit the target of 85% of patients beginning treatment within 2 months, a metric that the NHS is currently failing on.
There needs to be funding across the board. Funding increases across the board. They just don't have the support they need. These doctors are working incredibly hard, incredibly long hours.
To help them and help people like Josh. We'll find out how closely the government is listening when it publishes its National Cancer Plan in October. Sam Naz, Sky News.
Now, thanks to Sky News for that report. Someone will be diagnosed with cancer every 2 minutes in the UK by 2040, according to a new report, with certain particular types of cancer, particularly among young people, gastrointestinal cancer, brain tumours, and lung cancer amongst those which are spiking the most. Do you think this has got anything to do with COVID? Some people say that COVID sufferers themselves are more likely to get cancer, Richie.
Well, I mean, you only need to look at Pfizer. They put, in 2023, they put 43 billion bet on turbo cancers. And then if you look at people like Angus Daglish, who's one of the top oncologists in Britain, and he was talking about the turbo cancers and the vaccines being filled with SV40. And we first got a look in at SV40 when that was in the polio vaccines. And SV40 is something you put into mice to give them tumors. So, yeah, I mean, it's criminal on all ends, to be honest.
Yeah, Richie, we're going to leave it there because of the sound issues I had earlier on in this program. I'm going to invite you back if you'd like to come back, and we will correct one or two of the technical flaws that unfortunately hampered today's broadcast. I'll be back at the same time tomorrow, when I promise you'll be able to hear me throughout the whole program, and where I will be joined by Pelly Neroth-Taylor, geopolitical analyst, intellect and author and filmmaker. He recently made a trip to Britain. I want to hear all about it, and I'll see you all then. I'm Basil Valentine. This is Countdown. See you tomorrow. Unfiltered, uncensored, unprecedented.